It was a quiet afternoon at the local pharmacy, the kind of day that slipped by unnoticed, until it didn't. The usual hum of the fluorescent lights, the soft shuffle of feet, and the faint sound of a distant conversation filled the space. Martha, a frail woman in her late 70s, shuffled her way down the aisles, her steps slow but steady, guided by the comfort of routine. Her glasses sat low on her nose as she scanned the shelves for the familiar bottles she needed. Today, like any other, was a day filled with quiet determination. Martha had been coming to this pharmacy for years, buying her medications with what little she had. She wasn't wealthy. In fact, her pension barely covered her rent, let alone the cost of her pills. But she'd learned to make do, cents here, coins there, anything that kept her going. She reached the counter, where the young cashier, Lily, stood. Lily was texting on her phone, her posture slouched, as though the day's monotony had already drained her of any real energy. Martha approached slowly, feeling the weight of her years in her joints as she placed her small basket on the counter. "Hi, dear. I've got a few coins today," Martha said, her voice soft but filled with warmth. Lily glanced up briefly, her expression flat and uninterested. "Okay," she muttered, barely looking at the coins that Martha began to count out. There were pennies, nickels, and dimes, small amounts that made up the difference between what she had and what she needed. The cashier sighed, tapping her pen against the counter as the coins clinked one by one. "Really?" Lily muttered under her breath, loud enough for Martha to hear. "You're paying with coins? I don't have all day, you know." Martha paused, a pang of embarrassment creeping up her neck. She wasn't unfamiliar with the impatience of others, but this felt different. Something about Lily's tone, the eye roll, the obvious irritation, it stung deeper than it should have. "I'm sorry, dear. I'm just a little short today." "I can get it together," Martha said, trying to smile, though the effort made her voice falter slightly. She wasn't asking for sympathy, just a little patience. Lily, growing visibly annoyed, clicked her tongue. "You're really holding up the line for this?" She gestured toward the small group of customers behind Martha, who were now shifting uncomfortably, some exchanging awkward glances. Martha's hands trembled as she continued to count, the weight of Lily's harsh words pressing down on her chest. She felt the stares of the other customers, the impatience building. The coins in her hands didn't seem to make sense anymore, not when she was surrounded by an energy that felt so hostile. At that moment, someone else in the pharmacy took notice. Keanu Reeves, standing in the corner near the over-the-counter medication aisle, had been quietly waiting for his prescription. He overheard the conversation, the sharpness in Lily's tone, the awkward silence that hung in the air. He wasn't sure why it bothered him so much, maybe because it wasn't the first time he'd seen someone be treated this way, or maybe because he couldn't stand seeing someone like Martha, clearly struggling, being made to feel small in front of others. As he stood there, trying to decide whether to step in or just mind his business, a voice inside him urged him to act. Would he just stand there? Would he do nothing, like everyone else? Or would he speak up, even if it meant stepping into an uncomfortable situation? Martha finally gathered the last of her change, a shaky smile forming on her lips. "Thank you, dear. I appreciate your patience." But Lily's expression didn't soften. "Yeah, whatever," she muttered, barely handing over the receipt. "Next time, maybe try to use paper bills, yeah?" The words stung more than they should have, but Martha just nodded, gathering her things. She didn't want to make a scene. She never did. But as she turned to leave, Keanu stepped forward, his voice calm and steady. "Is that really necessary?" he asked, his gaze fixed on Lily, who froze for a moment, caught off guard by his presence. And that was the moment the atmosphere in the pharmacy shifted. Martha looked up, her brow furrowing in confusion, and for the briefest second, a flicker of hope passed through her eyes. Keanu's quiet intervention was a subtle spark, one that would ignite something much bigger than anyone in the store could have anticipated. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The moment Keanu stepped forward, the air in the pharmacy seemed to thicken. The atmosphere, already tense, now felt like it was about to crack. Customers paused, glancing over with a mix of curiosity and discomfort. Martha, still holding her bag of coins, turned her head slightly, her eyes flickering with uncertainty. She wasn't used to anyone standing up for her, especially not in such a public way. Lily's face contorted, her initial shock fading into irritation. "What's your deal?" she snapped, her hand waving dismissively at Keanu. "It's none of your business." Keanu, unfazed, kept his voice steady. "I think it is. There's no reason to treat someone like that, especially not someone older, who's just trying to pay for her medicine." Lily's eyes narrowed. "Oh, so you think you can come in here and tell me how to do my job? It's not like I've got all day to watch someone count out pennies." The words hung in the air, heavy and charged. The other customers shifted uncomfortably, most of them avoiding eye contact. But Keanu's presence seemed to have a magnetic pull, and a few of them leaned in slightly, as if unsure what would happen next but not wanting to miss the unfolding drama. Martha, her face flushed with embarrassment, tried to shrink back, hoping that the whole situation would just disappear. She didn't want to cause any more trouble. She just wanted to pay for her medicine and go home. But Keanu wasn't about to let the moment slip by. "No one should have to feel humiliated just to buy something they need," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You're making it worse by being rude." Lily scoffed, clearly not impressed. "It's not like she's got $1 million prescription. You think I've got time to babysit people who want to pay with coins?" Keanu's patience was starting to thin. "I'm sure there's a better way to handle this," he replied, his eyes now narrowing just slightly. "A little kindness goes a long way." Lily opened her mouth to respond, but before she could say anything, Greg, the pharmacy manager, appeared from the back office. He had been listening to the exchange from a distance and had clearly seen enough. "What's going on here?" Greg asked, his tone stern, though there was an edge of embarrassment in his voice. Greg wasn't a fan of confrontation, but he'd seen Lily's attitude toward customers before. He just hadn't known how bad it had gotten. Lily, visibly flustered, quickly shifted the blame. "This guy was telling me how to do my job. He doesn't even know the half of it." Keanu's eyes briefly met Greg's, his expression unchanged. He didn't need to say much, his presence alone seemed to communicate everything. Greg turned to Lily, his voice quieter now but serious. "Lily, I've asked you to treat every customer with respect. That includes being patient. You're not going to act like this here." Lily's face turned a deep shade of red, and for a moment, she didn't say anything. The silence stretched on, and it felt as though everyone in the store was holding their breath. Martha stood frozen, not sure whether to feel relief or further embarrassment. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not for something like this. But the conversation had already shifted, and the focus was no longer solely on her. Keanu, sensing that the situation might have calmed, turned his attention back to Martha. He gave her a small, reassuring smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "I hope that helps," he said softly. Martha blinked, still processing the sudden turn of events. "Thank you," she muttered, her voice barely audible. She hadn't expected anyone to speak up for her, especially not someone like Keanu Reeves. The customers, who had been avoiding the scene just moments before, now seemed to relax a little. Some smiled at Keanu, clearly impressed by his intervention, while others returned to their shopping, clearly relieved that things weren't escalating any further. Lily, standing behind the counter, was still fuming, but her defiance had started to crack. Her gaze flicked between Keanu and Greg, then back to Martha. She swallowed hard, trying to regain her composure. But she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. She'd made a choice earlier, and it hadn't gone the way she expected. Keanu gave one last glance toward Greg, then turned to leave, but not before offering a parting thought. "It's never too late to be kind," he said, his voice carrying just enough weight to make sure everyone could hear it. The words hung in the air as Keanu walked toward the door, his presence lingering long after he was gone. As the door closed behind him, the quiet hum of the pharmacy returned, but it was different now. The mood was lighter, the tension had eased, and the customers began to settle back into their routines. But for Lily and Martha, the impact of what had just happened would linger long after the moment had passed. The day passed in a strange silence for Martha. The encounter at the pharmacy replayed in her mind, each moment feeling more surreal than the last. Keanu's words echoed in her ears, a soft reminder that kindness still existed in the world. She'd never imagined that someone would step in for her like that, especially not in a place like that. It was a small moment, but it felt like the world had shifted for her. Martha sat in her cozy living room that evening, an old cardigan draped over her frail shoulders, and stared out the window. The light of the setting sun was fading, casting an orange glow over her small neighborhood. It was peaceful outside, but inside, her mind raced. She couldn't shake the feeling that today wasn't just any day. Something had changed, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. As much as she wanted to forget about what happened at the pharmacy, there was a nagging thought that refused to leave her. Could people be kind, truly kind, without expecting anything in return? Could she ever repay Keanu for his gesture? The thought brought her back to the present moment, the reality of her life. She was just one person in a world that moved too quickly for her to keep up. But today had felt different. Meanwhile, across town, Lily was still processing the events of the afternoon. She'd spent the rest of her shift in a daze, her mind running over and over the words that Keanu had said. "It's never too late to be kind." That simple phrase seemed to stick in her mind like glue, irritating her with its simplicity. Lily wasn't a bad person. She was young, she was busy, and she was trying to make ends meet. Her job at the pharmacy was just one of many things on her plate. She had dreams, ambitions, and a sense of urgency about life. But somewhere along the way, kindness had gotten lost. Her impatience, her frustration, it all had a reason, right? But Keanu's words made her question everything. Sitting in the break room, Lily stared at her phone, absent-mindedly scrolling through social media, but it felt like nothing mattered. Her phone buzzed, breaking her thoughts. It was a message from her mother. "How's work going? Don't forget to call me later about the rent." Lily sighed and tossed her phone on the table. She could hear her mother's voice in her head, always pushing, always reminding her of what she needed to do. The pressure to make something of herself weighed heavily, and sometimes, the stress made her snap at people like Martha. But after what had happened earlier that day, Lily wasn't sure where she stood anymore. The next morning, Lily woke up early, her usual routine already set in motion. She grabbed her coffee, took a quick shower, and pulled on her uniform. But as she was walking out the door, something pulled her back. It wasn't like her to feel this way, guilty, uncertain, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she needed to make things right. By the time she arrived at the pharmacy, the morning rush was in full swing. She quickly went to her register, trying to push aside the thoughts that had been gnawing at her since yesterday. But the moment she saw Martha walk in again, a flood of emotions hit her all at once. Martha didn't notice her at first. She was standing in line, trying to grab a few things from the aisle. She looked a little more confident today, her back a bit straighter than the day before. Lily watched her for a moment before stepping up to the counter, taking a deep breath. She wasn't sure what she was going to say, but she knew she had to say something. "Hi, Mrs. Harper," Lily said, her voice a little more tentative than she intended. Martha looked up, surprised. She hadn't expected Lily to speak to her, let alone acknowledge her so warmly. "Oh, hello," Martha replied, her tone polite but cautious. Lily fidgeted with the pen in her hand, trying to figure out how to start. I just wanted to apologize for how I treated you yesterday," she blurted out, her face flushing with embarrassment. "That was out of line. I didn't mean to make you feel bad. It's just, sometimes, I'm under a lot of pressure, and I don't always handle it well." Martha blinked, clearly taken aback by Lily's apology. It wasn't something she was used to, especially not from someone so young. "Oh, dear, there's no need to apologize," she said, a soft smile forming on her face. "We all have our days, don't we?" Lily shook her head. "No, really. I've been thinking about it all night. I was rude, and you didn't deserve that. I hope you can forgive me." Martha studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I understand. Life can be difficult for us all. We're just doing our best." Lily felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The tension that had built up inside her since the previous day seemed to melt away, replaced by a sense of relief. It wasn't often that people took the time to apologize, and it was even rarer for someone to accept the apology with such grace. "I appreciate that," Lily said, her voice quieter now. "And I promise to be more patient, with you and with everyone. I'll do better." Martha's smile widened, the kindness in her eyes evident. "You already are, dear." As the conversation drifted into lighter topics, the tension that had hung between them seemed to vanish entirely. The simple act of acknowledgement had mended something, an invisible bond had formed between the two women, and they both knew it. But there was more to come. More lessons to be learned, more challenges ahead, and Keanu's words would echo again, each time drawing them closer to the realization that kindness wasn't just a one-time act, it was something that could change lives, one small moment at a time. Lily stood behind the pharmacy counter the next day, feeling different. Not quite like a brand new person, but close enough. She still had the same challenges ahead, the same stresses, bills to pay, a future to worry about, but something had shifted inside her. She had been given a chance to change her behavior, to make amends, and for the first time in a long while, she was determined to take it seriously. Martha came in later that afternoon. She looked better today, more confident, perhaps because of the small spark of kindness she had felt from Keanu and Lily. The fact that Lily had apologized, that she'd acknowledged her wrong, had meant more than she realized. Martha wandered slowly through the aisles again, her steps purposeful but steady. She smiled to herself as she picked up a bottle of vitamins. There was something quietly peaceful about these small moments in life, and today, she was determined to make the most of them. When she approached the counter again, Lily was there, ready and waiting, her expression softer than before. "Hello, Mrs. Harper," Lily said with a warm smile. "How are you today?" Martha glanced at her, surprised by the genuine tone. The apology from yesterday had left an impression, and it was clear that Lily was making an effort to show a different side of herself. "Oh, I'm doing well today. Thank you for asking. How about you, dear?" Lily smiled more freely this time. "Better, honestly. I'm trying to be more patient. It's not always easy, but I'm learning." Martha's eyes twinkled with understanding. "We all are, dear. We all are." Lily rang up Martha's items, trying her best to remain calm and present. There was no hurry in her movements today. No frustration with the process, no rush to get things over with. She had learned something important, and though it was small, it was enough to start changing the way she viewed her job, and the people she interacted with. As Martha handed over her payment, this time, a mix of bills and coins, Lily was careful to treat each piece of currency with respect. There was something symbolic in the way she did it, a small act that now felt meaningful. "Thank you, Lily," Martha said with a smile. You're doing just fine. Lily's heart warmed. Thank you, Mrs. Harper. I'll keep trying. Martha took her bag and began walking toward the door, but she paused for a moment and turned back. You know, she said thoughtfully, I think we all need a little reminder now and then that kindness doesn't cost anything. It's the one thing in life that never runs out. Lily stood still for a moment, considering Martha's words. She had heard them before, from her mother, from her teachers, but today they felt different. The weight of the day's interactions made them resonate more than ever. I'll keep that in mind, Lily said softly. As Martha exited, the pharmacy felt quieter, calmer, the energy in the air lighter than it had been in days. Lily glanced around at the store, the shelves stacked with products, but for some reason, it all seemed less overwhelming now. The noise in her head, the self-imposed pressure, had quieted. It was then that she noticed a familiar face in the corner of the store. Keanu. He was standing by the aisle, casually flipping through a magazine, his presence as unassuming as it had been the day before. The sight of him brought a sense of warmth to Lily's chest. He was the one who had made her reflect, the one who had spoken up when no one else had. She didn't know why, but she felt an overwhelming need to thank him. She hadn't gotten the chance yesterday, and maybe she never would have, but today felt different. Today, it seemed like the right moment. With a deep breath, Lily walked over to him, her footsteps quieter than usual, her nerves bubbling in her stomach. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she couldn't let another moment slip by. Hey, she said, her voice sounding steadier than she felt. I just wanted to thank you. Yesterday, I wasn't exactly nice. But you were kind to step in for that woman. And I've been thinking about it ever since. I think I needed to hear what you said. Keanu looked up at her, his expression calm and friendly. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable, he said gently. But sometimes, it's just important to step up when we see something that isn't right. People deserve kindness, even when they don't expect it. Lily nodded, her eyes softening. I get it now. And I'm going to do better. I didn't realize how much my attitude was affecting people. Keanu smiled, the warmth of his presence easy to feel. We all get caught up in our own world sometimes. The important thing is that we recognize it and do something about it. There was a pause, and for a moment, Lily wasn't sure what to say. But somehow, in this moment of connection, words didn't seem necessary. They both understood what was left unsaid. Thank you, Lily said again, a genuine smile breaking across her face. Keanu gave her a nod. You're welcome. Keep being kind to yourself, too. That's just as important. With that, he turned and walked toward the door, disappearing into the street outside. Lily stood there for a moment longer, feeling lighter than she had in a long time. The days that followed were filled with an unexpected sense of peace. The world, as chaotic as it was, seemed quieter somehow. The usual pressures of life, the rush to meet deadlines, to keep up with everything, didn't seem as heavy anymore. Lily began to notice things she hadn't before, the simple joys of small, everyday moments. Her morning coffee felt more satisfying, the early sunrises seemed a little more beautiful, and even the quiet hum of the pharmacy felt less like a burden. But there was something else, too. A lingering feeling that she wasn't quite done. Not yet. The encounter with Keanu, the apology to Martha, and the kindness that had been shared, it was just the beginning of something more. Lily could sense it, deep down. Meanwhile, Keanu, though he had already disappeared from the pharmacy after that one brief encounter, wasn't far from her mind. There was something about him, something about his effortless way of making a difference, that stuck with her. His presence was brief, but it felt impactful in a way she hadn't expected. The kindness he exuded wasn't flashy or loud, it was just real. It made Lily wonder if she, too, could make a difference in her own way. But where would she begin? Could one person truly change things? Could her small acts of kindness be enough to create a ripple effect? She found herself thinking about that more and more, especially when things felt tough at work. There were still days when the stress of her responsibilities weighed her down, when customers were impatient, or when the world seemed a little too demanding. But even on those days, she thought of Keanu's words, "Keep being kind to yourself." It was a reminder, a lifeline that helped her focus on the bigger picture, not just the challenges in front of her. It wasn't long before Lily had another opportunity to put her newfound perspective into action. The pharmacy was busier than usual one Thursday afternoon. The aisles were crowded with people hurriedly picking up prescriptions, stocking up on cold medicine, and gathering the usual household essentials. It was the kind of day that had once left Lily frazzled, scrambling to get through her shift, but today, she felt a quiet resolve in her chest. Even when the line at the register grew long, she stayed calm, greeting each customer with a smile. Then, a familiar figure appeared in the line, Martha. She was holding a basket with a few items, her usual slow and steady pace making her seem at ease, even in the bustle of the pharmacy. The sight of her reminded Lily of all that had happened, how she had apologized, how the conversation had changed both of them. As Martha stepped up to the counter, she gave Lily a friendly wave, her smile warm. "Good afternoon, dear." Lily returned the smile, a genuine one. "Hi, Mrs. Harper. How's everything going today?" Martha paused for a moment, glancing at the items in her basket before looking back at Lily. "You know, I've been thinking about what you said the other day, when you apologized. It was a small thing, but it meant a lot to me." Lily's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected to hear that. "Oh, well. I meant it. I really did." Martha's eyes softened. "I know you did. And I appreciate it. But more than that, I've noticed something in you since then. There's a different energy about you. You're more open, I suppose." Lily felt a wave of emotion surge through her. It wasn't just Martha's kindness, it was the realization that she had actually made a change. That one small act, one moment of honesty, had led to something deeper. "Thank you," Lily said quietly. "I think I've been trying to be kinder, not just to others, but to myself, too." Martha nodded, her smile kind. "That's the key, dear. Kindness isn't just about what we give, it's also about what we allow ourselves to receive. You've taken the first step, and now you just have to keep walking." Lily absorbed Martha's words, feeling their weight settle in her heart. She knew there was still a long road ahead of her. There would be more days of frustration, more struggles to balance work and life, but she had something now. She had a new perspective, one that was slowly but surely reshaping her approach to everything. As she finished ringing up Martha's items, Lily glanced up at the clock. There were only a few hours left in her shift, and the thought of what awaited her at the end of the day didn't seem as daunting as it once had. The pharmacy would eventually quiet down. She'd go home, grab a hot meal, and maybe even take some time to just breathe. Martha gathered her things, ready to leave, but before she turned to go, she paused again. "You know, Lily," she said, her voice low but sincere, "I think you've got something special. I see it in you. Don't lose that." Lily smiled, her throat tight with gratitude. "I won't. I promise." As Martha left, Lily stood for a moment, her fingers resting on the counter. The pharmacy had been full of noise and chaos all day, but in this brief moment, everything felt clear. She wasn't just going through the motions anymore. She was actively choosing to be different, to be better. And maybe that was the real power of kindness. It wasn't just about changing other people. It was about changing yourself, one small moment at a time. The days after the confrontation with the rude customer were both calm and unsettling. Lily found herself reflecting on the event more than she expected. She had faced anger and frustration head-on, remained calm, and even managed to walk away from the encounter with a sense of dignity. It felt like a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. Yet, as much as she tried to push it from her mind, something lingered. A question kept echoing in her mind: was this enough? Could one moment of kindness really make a difference in the grand scheme of things? Lily wasn't sure, but she was beginning to feel like she was standing on the edge of something bigger. Something that would push her even further. It wasn't long before that something arrived. It came in the form of a phone call, an unexpected one. Lily was working her usual shift when her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was an unfamiliar number, and a quick glance at the screen told her it was a local number. Without thinking, she picked up. "Hello, this is Lily." A voice on the other end was clear but slightly frantic. "Lily, this is Greg from the pharmacy. We've got a situation here. Can you come in? We're really short-staffed, and I don't know how much longer we can hold things together." Lily's heart raced. It wasn't uncommon for the pharmacy to run low on staff, but the urgency in Greg's voice sent a chill through her. "Of course, I'll be there as soon as I can. What's going on?" "There's a line out the door, people are getting impatient, and one of the pharmacists just called out sick. It's chaos, Lily. Can you please just hurry?" Lily didn't hesitate. She grabbed her bag, slipped on her jacket, and rushed out of the door. The familiar streets that led to the pharmacy seemed to blur as she focused on getting there as quickly as possible. She didn't know what to expect, but the thought of the chaos waiting for her made her stomach twist. As soon as she arrived at the pharmacy, she could feel the pressure. The line of customers snaked out the door, and the aisles were filled with people scrambling for what they needed. Greg was behind the counter, looking flustered as he tried to juggle prescriptions and customer complaints at once. His eyes lit up when he saw Lily, and he quickly waved her over. "Lily, thank God you're here," he said, relief flooding his features. "We're in way over our heads today. Can you take the front? I'll try to catch up back here." Lily nodded, her pulse quickening. "Don't worry, I've got it. Let's get this under control." She immediately stepped behind the counter, greeting the first customer with a calm smile. But as the seconds ticked by, the pressure began to mount. People were getting more impatient, more vocal about the delays. Lily could feel the weight of their frustration, and it threatened to overwhelm her. But she stayed focused. The line never seemed to end. Each time Lily thought she was catching up, more customers appeared, each one needing something different. A prescription refilled, an over-the-counter medicine restocked, or a complicated insurance issue. She was moving as fast as she could, but no matter how hard she worked, it never seemed to be enough. By the time the afternoon rush had passed, Lily was exhausted. Her feet ached, her hands were sore from scanning and typing, and her brain felt fried from the constant demand. It wasn't just the customers, it was the internal pressure she was placing on herself. She had promised herself that she wouldn't let frustration get the best of her. That she would stay calm. But now, as the store began to quiet down, she could feel it creeping in, the frustration she had worked so hard to avoid. Lily tried to take a deep breath, but it didn't help much. The stress lingered like a weight on her shoulders. As she moved to take a break, she saw Martha again, quietly browsing through the aisles. Lily's heart lifted a little. The older woman had become a symbol of her progress, a reminder of the importance of kindness. Martha noticed her and gave a gentle wave, her warm eyes scanning Lily's tired face. "How are you holding up, dear?" she asked, her voice soft. Lily smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "It's been a crazy day, Martha. I think I'm starting to hit a wall." Martha nodded sympathetically, walking toward the counter where Lily stood. "I can see that. But remember, you don't have to carry everything by yourself. People around you care, even if it doesn't always feel that way." Lily looked at her, grateful for the kindness in Martha's words. "I'm trying. It's just so much sometimes, you know. Martha placed a hand gently on her arm. I know, dear. But you've been doing something very important here. You've been giving people something they didn't know they needed. Sometimes it's just a smile. Sometimes it's a little patience. You're doing better than you think. Lily took a slow breath, absorbing the wisdom in Martha's words. It felt like a balm on a wound she hadn't realized was there, her own self-doubt. Just then, a familiar voice broke through the quiet moment. Hey, Lily, you doing okay? Lily turned to see Keanu once again standing at the door, that calm presence filling the space. His gaze was kind, understanding. I'm hanging in there, she said, smiling at him. Just trying to keep my head above water. Keanu nodded, his eyes thoughtful. I get it. But you're doing great. You've got more strength in you than you realize. Just remember to give yourself the same kindness you give to others. Lily's heart warmed at his words. She had heard the same thing from Martha, but somehow hearing it from Keanu, who had so effortlessly shown her the power of kindness before, made it feel more real. Thanks, Keanu, she said, the exhaustion easing from her shoulders just a little. I really needed that. He smiled back at her before heading toward the counter to grab his own prescription. As he walked away, Lily couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. Today had been difficult. She had faced more than one challenge and had felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. But she wasn't alone. She had the support of people who understood what it meant to struggle and to keep going anyway. And that, Lily realized, was the real test. It wasn't about avoiding conflict or always keeping calm. It was about pushing through the difficult moments, knowing that the kindness she showed herself and others could carry her through. The following days blurred together in a mix of exhaustion and relief. Lily had started to find her rhythm again. The intense pressure of that chaotic afternoon slowly faded into the background, and though she was tired, she knew she had done her best. It wasn't perfect, but that was okay. She had survived the storm. But as much as she tried to move on, something felt off. There was an underlying tension in the air, one she couldn't quite shake. Every day had its little victories, but there were still those moments, those quiet moments, when the doubt crept back in. She wondered if she was really making a difference. She wondered if the small acts of kindness she had been focusing on were enough to make her feel fulfilled. Lily wasn't sure when it happened, but something inside her had started to shift again. The weight of everything, the stress of work, the effort to be the best version of herself, began to feel like too much to carry. She found herself distracted at work, unable to focus for long stretches. Her interactions with customers started to feel mechanical. She wasn't as patient as she had been. She wasn't as kind. And then came the moment she had been avoiding, the breaking point. It happened on a Thursday morning, another routine day at the pharmacy. The store was quieter than usual, and Lily found herself getting lost in her thoughts. She was tidying the shelves when she heard the familiar sound of the doorbell ringing. She looked up and saw a woman walking toward the counter, her face tight with frustration. The woman was in her mid-30s, with unkempt hair and a look of impatience that was unmistakable. She carried a prescription in one hand and a small child in the other. The child, a little girl no older than 5, was crying loudly, tugging at her mother's sleeve. "Excuse me," the woman said curtly as she approached the counter. "I need this filled. Now." Lily tried to smile, but it felt forced. She was tired. She was drained. And her patience, which she had worked so hard to build, was wearing thin. "Of course, I'll just take a quick look at the prescription," Lily said, trying to keep her tone neutral. The woman sighed impatiently, her gaze flicking to the child in her arms. "Hurry up. I've got places to be." Lily nodded and began scanning the prescription. But her mind was elsewhere, her hands moving mechanically. She couldn't seem to focus. The little girl's crying grew louder, and Lily could feel the woman's eyes on her, glaring with increasing impatience. It was as if everything, the noise, the pressure, was all closing in on her. "Are you done yet?" the woman snapped. "My daughter needs this medicine. You're wasting my time." Something inside Lily snapped. The words that had been sitting on the edge of her consciousness for days now found their way to her lips before she could stop them. "I'm doing my best," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "You can wait your turn like everyone else." The words felt like they had come from someone else. Lily stood frozen for a moment, the tension in the air palpable. She hadn't meant to snap at the woman. But the frustration, the exhaustion, it had all spilled out at once. The woman's face flushed with anger. "Excuse me? How dare you speak to me like that?" Lily's breath hitched. The room seemed to shrink around her. She had crossed a line, and she knew it. She had just let the weight of everything she had been holding back for so long explode in a moment of weakness. The woman's voice grew louder, drawing the attention of other customers. "I don't know what kind of employee you are, but I'm never coming back here again. You've lost my business." Lily's heart hammered in her chest. The shame, the guilt, the realization of what she had done all hit her at once. She had failed. She had let her frustrations get the better of her, and now it was all unraveling. Keanu was in the store, as if on cue. He had been browsing near the back when he heard the commotion. He walked toward the counter with that same calm presence, his eyes immediately assessing the situation. The woman was fuming, the little girl still crying in her arms. Lily stood frozen, her face flushed with embarrassment. "Is everything all right here?" Keanu asked, his voice quiet but firm. The woman turned on him. "This employee," she pointed at Lily, "was incredibly rude to me. She's completely unprofessional, and I will never shop here again." Keanu's gaze flicked to Lily. His expression softened, and he gave a small nod as if he understood. He then turned back to the woman, his voice calm and steady. "I'm sorry for the experience you've had today. That's certainly not what we want. But I'd like to ask you to give her a moment to finish helping you. I'm sure there's been some miscommunication." The woman huffed, but the tension in her posture eased slightly. She looked down at her daughter, still sobbing. Keanu turned to Lily, his eyes kind, but there was a seriousness to his gaze. "Lily," he said softly, "I know you're having a tough time, but you've got to remember, no matter what happens, you've got to hold on to the calm inside you. People depend on that." Lily's throat tightened as she fought back the tears. She nodded silently, ashamed of what had just happened. She could feel the weight of her own failure, the sharp sting of her words. But Keanu's words, his kindness in the moment, reminded her of something she had almost forgotten. It wasn't about being perfect. It was about trying. The woman, still annoyed, took a deep breath and let Lily finish processing the prescription. She grabbed the bag without another word, storming out of the pharmacy with the little girl still crying in her arms. Lily stood there for a moment, feeling like she was on the verge of breaking down. But Keanu stayed beside her, offering the kind of silence that made her feel seen, not judged. When the woman was gone, Keanu spoke again, his voice steady. "It's okay to make mistakes, Lily. Don't let one bad moment define you. You're doing your best, and that's all anyone can ask for." Lily nodded, feeling both devastated and comforted. The kindness from him, after everything, was exactly what she needed. He was right. One bad moment didn't define her. Lily sat in the back room of the pharmacy, the hum of fluorescent lights above her the only sound in the otherwise quiet space. The day had slowed, and she had finally found a moment to breathe. But the events of the morning were still fresh in her mind. Her mistake, her snap at the customer, had made her feel as though she had failed not just herself but everyone who had supported her. But as she sat there, trying to regain her composure, she thought back to the words Keanu had spoken. It's okay to make mistakes, Lily. Don't let one bad moment define you. You're doing your best, and that's all anyone can ask for. The memory of his kindness settled in her chest, giving her the strength to push through the sting of the earlier confrontation. Lily was still grappling with the guilt of the outburst, but something inside her was shifting. She wasn't perfect. She never would be. But that didn't mean she couldn't try again, even when things went wrong. She could learn from her mistakes. She could grow from them. The bell above the door chimed again, signaling a new customer entering the pharmacy. Lily straightened up, took a deep breath, and walked out to the front. She had decided. It was time to face the world again, with all its messiness, its chaos, and yes, even its mistakes. As she returned to the counter, she saw Keanu talking with Greg in the back. His presence, as always, was a calming force. She wasn't sure if Keanu even knew how much of a difference his words had made for her, but they were the anchor she had needed. It was amazing how a single conversation could change everything. The woman from earlier, who had been so angry, was gone. But Lily was determined to make sure that her next interaction was better. The next person who walked up to her wouldn't have to deal with her frustration, her exhaustion, or her guilt. She was going to be kind, calm, and patient. She had to be. The next customer approached the counter, a young man in his late 20s, with a tired expression on his face. He looked like he had been running errands all day, and the last thing he needed was someone to make his day harder. Lily smiled warmly as he stepped forward. "Hi there, what can I help you with today?" The young man looked at her with a relieved smile. "I just need to pick up a prescription," he said, handing her a small piece of paper. Lily took the prescription from him and began typing it into the system, all while keeping her tone light and friendly. She had resolved to make this a positive experience for both of them. She wasn't going to let anything at all, ruin this moment. As she processed the prescription, the young man sighed softly. "Long day," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. Lily looked up at him, her smile softening. "I hear you. It feels like the days just never end, right? But you're almost there. Just one more stop, and you can get some rest." He chuckled, clearly grateful for the small conversation. "You're right. I needed that. Thanks." Lily handed him the prescription bag and gave him a smile that felt genuine. "Take care of yourself. Get some sleep." As the young man walked away, Lily felt a little more light-hearted. It wasn't a groundbreaking moment, but it was enough to remind her of something important. She had the power to change someone's day, even if it was just a small interaction. The rest of the afternoon passed by in a blur. With each new customer, Lily reminded herself to slow down, to focus on the little things. She gave them her full attention, her kindness, and most importantly, her patience. By the time Keanu came to pick up his prescription later that afternoon, the pharmacy felt different. The air was less tense. The pace had slowed to something more manageable. Lily was no longer running on fumes. She had found her footing again. Keanu approached the counter with that easy, comforting smile of his. "Hey, how's everything going?" he asked, his eyes scanning the store with a careful, yet relaxed look. Lily smiled back, feeling a sense of peace that had been absent earlier. "It's better. I think I'm starting to get back into the groove." Keanu nodded, clearly pleased with her response. "I knew you would. You've got it in you. Sometimes it's just about finding your way again, even after you feel like you've lost it." Lily nodded, appreciating the sentiment. "Thanks, Keanu. I really needed to hear that." He smiled warmly. "Anytime." As he paid for his prescription, Lily realized how much she had learned over the past few weeks. It wasn't just about dealing with difficult customers or navigating the chaos of her job. It was about embracing her own imperfections and learning to find peace in the midst of the storm. She had come so far, and she was proud of herself, even on the days when things didn't go perfectly. As Keanu turned to leave, he paused and glanced back at her. "Hey, just remember, you're doing great, okay? Keep being you." Lily watched him leave, feeling a quiet sense of pride. She wasn't perfect, but she was enough. And that was all she needed to be. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that has helped you get back on track when things seem like they're falling apart?